Now that everyone else in the basketball world has had a chance to talk about his trade request, today Davis addressed the topic for the first time.
I feel like it's my time. I gave the city, organization, fans, everything I feel like I could. Don't know how long I'm gonna play this game. People's careers are short, and I feel like it's my time to move on.
Was there an ultimatum issued about wanting to go to the Lakers?
No, I never gave me or my representation never gave Pelicans, a destination or anything. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. Maybe the connection, with my representation, but we never gave Pelicans a destination.
So you would be willing to play elsewhere other than one place?
It's really it's on the Pelicans.
Anthony, did you and your representation talk about the fact that if you're not traded by the deadline, you potentially may have to sit out the rest of the season and won't be able to play?
My intentions is to play. I've been working to get my finger back healthy. Obviously, it's a tough situation, but my intention is to still play. And when I'm able to play, I plan on suiting up.
What was the thought process of making your request public?
All those questions. You contact my agent. He's more than happy to inform you guys on that.
Was the timing? Obviously, was that when the decision was made, or had you thought about that before, and it just became the time to do it?
Time for what?
Of announcing your request. Had you made up your mind before that, or was it just there was a realization and then you had the conversation?
Obviously, you think about stuff, and we just felt like at that time, actually the day wasn't playing, and honestly, my reputation didn't drop the story or leak the story or anything like that. Someone else had gave it to a reporter. A reporter called my agent and asked him, was this true? So we never wanted to leak it to the media. Wanted to do everything in-house, but that wasn't one of them.
Was the timing determined to get a trade before the before the deadline?
I just thought, doing it sooner than later. Not just for myself, just out of respect for the organization. Ms. Benson, they've done everything for me, the fans, community. So giving them an opportunity and enough time to be able to make a decision back for the organization.
Was there anything in particular that happened that made you say, okay, now's the time to make the request? Or is it?
When and why did this organization not give you the confidence that you could win a championship here, that you could win at a high level? Like you said, that's the reason that you wanted to leave.
Like I said, I just feel like it's my time, and it's just as simple as that.
Well, the player's in an interesting situation always during something like this because, his true feelings may never come out, whatever they might be. He's probably not just going to say, I really want to play with LeBron James and the Lakers. If that's the case, right? He's not going to come out and say that. Is there anything, do you think, the Pelicans could have done to avoid this fate? I mean, aside from winning a championship.
I think that, I saw Charles the other night, our guy Charles, and got a little upset about Anthony asking for the trade. And I think back, and these Pelican teams, they might not have been as bad as Charles's teams in Philadelphia back in the day, but it was very frustrating. And I think back, and Charles didn't ask to be traded. He was eventually traded. But I think back, Charles could have toiled and spent every year in Philadelphia, and I don't want that for Anthony. Anthony won a title in college somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I don't recall.
Yeah, somewhere.
Look
that up. Let's get our stat guys
research on that.
But he did win his title in college, I'm pretty sure, somewhere.
Yeah, I heard that.
He plays winning basketball. They brought Boogie in last year. Anthony sacrificed his game when Boogie came in there. I think he's a winner, and I think he's just ready to win and move on.
Is this going to be a short-term thing or a long-term into the summer thing, I think, as most people are guessing at this point?
You have to believe this goes into summer where, you can have a market of 28 potential or 29 destinations. That really is one.
Right.
When you really want to look at the asset pool, maybe two with L.A. And all their young pieces. It's really interesting. The collective bargaining agreement and in the negotiation, there's been a lot of talk and a great deal of work done, is how do you protect your, franchise level player?
Right.
The designated rookie scale extension, the designated veteran extension, longer deals, earlier extensions. And at the end of the day, what we continue to find is that players have a right to choose, but the best thing you can do to convince them to stay is to build a winning environment. And you can't blame any player who goes through 7 years and goes two playoff appearances,
right,
but only wins one round. And then if you really want to take a step back, then you can take a look and say, you know what, this might be the greatest thing for the New Orleans Pelicans. Let's take the Indiana Pacers, for instance. They were in a similar situation with Paul George. Kevin Pritchard and that front office did an incredible job in a trade that they got beat up for that has set up that franchise for the next 5 to 7 years, notwithstanding the tough injury for Oladipo.
Yeah.
So this could end up being a great trade for everybody, like it was between Oklahoma City and Indiana. And let's just hope that that's the resolution to this thing. And big nod to Kevin Pritchard, because that was incredible what they did.
It does make sense for the Pelicans to wait until more teams can jump in with potential offers, but the LA Times has reported that the Lakers have already offered Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, and Ivica Zubac, and a first-round pick for Anthony Davis. Could that be enough to sway the Pelicans to move sooner on this?
Might have
That's
to throw in Jeannie Buss.
Not sure she's tradable, but okay.
Everyone's tradable, Matt.
It's so interesting. Like, the best player always wins the deal, right? Like, so Jason Tatum, if he's made available by Boston. Now, every front office may have a different view, and I'm sure there are some people that evaluate the Lakers prospects differently. But Jason Tatum, unanimously, one would think is the best prospect, and so you would wait for that.
He's going to be offered
that's assuming.
That deal.
Now, you take the next step is, okay, who has the best draft picks?
Right.
Well, that Memphis pick in 2021 that could be unprotected, that's maybe the second best asset, and Boston just happens to hold both of them.
Yeah.
So, it certainly seems that this is going to go one way if it gets there, with the big change being Kyrie Irving and what the New York Knicks just did, which we talked about earlier.
Right.
And that's got to be the hope that the Lakers have in this whole thing.
How many teams are trying to now, read Anthony Davis's thoughts? It was interesting, by the way, he said explicitly they didn't want to leak things, didn't want the story to go public.
Well, they didn't leak it.
They didn't technically leak it. His agent went on the record.
Yeah, they
got him fined $50,000. So that's a whole other discussion. But
that's like fining you 50 cents.
Yeah, exactly. That's about right. So in terms of his mindset, like, you're in a front office somewhere and you're trying to figure this out. You can do your due diligence, but ultimately you don't know exactly what's going on in his head.
No, you don't. And in some ways, you're empathetic for a young player who's, trying to be loyal to his teammates, really probably genuinely appreciates his coaches, which we haven't even talked about. The coaches, the New Orleans coaches, I mean, they've battled injury. They've had players moving in and out, and they've kept that group fighting. And, they've done a nice thing with Jahlil Okafor, for instance. Mm-hmm. So Alvin Gentry, you feel for him and the job he's done. But, it's just a young player who may not, know how to navigate this situation and just trying to do it the best they can.
I think if Danny wants him and feels like he can re-sign him, he'll get him. That Danny and those guys, they haven't made very many mistakes in the last decade or so. Yeah. They haven't made emotional decisions. They got shut out a couple years ago on KD. Mm-hmm. And when I look at this situation, because I think they felt like they had a real shot. Mm-hmm. And they went right down to the wire with KD. You just wonder if, maybe Boston isn't in this situation with AD now as well. But I think, you talked about Jason Tatum. If all of a sudden he's part of things,
sure, I think
it changes things. But Danny holds a lot of cards, and you have to know that there's a big plan. They've targeted AD for a long time now,
for sure,
and they've gone through all these machinations. So they're prepared.